on businesses that are creating wealth and jobs, Mr. Speaker. So in this budget, where investment is mentioned 456 times, gender 358 times, Canadian Armed Forces 0, Mr. Speaker, it shows their priorities.
The honourable member Durham will have 3 minutes remaining. 3 minutes remaining in his speech when the House next undertakes this topic. Statements by members. Déclaration de député. The honourable member for Ottawa West Nepean.
I rise today to pay tribute to legendary Ottawa comedian Mike MacDonald, who passed away on Saturday. A renowned stand-up comedian for over 40 years, Mike's unique comedy routines inspired a generation of Canadian comedians. In addition to appearances on Just for Laughs, late-night talk shows, hosting the Geminis and the Canadian Comedy Awards, Mike MacDonald also starred in several movies, including Three Fugitives, The Funny Farm, and Mr. Nice Guy. Raised in an Air Force family, Mike used his ability to make people laugh to bring joy to the Canadian troops based in Kandahar. Mike MacDonald also spoke out about his own struggles with mental health, using comedy to help people view mental health in a more positive light and end the stigma. In fact, he was scheduled to MC a fundraiser for first responders' mental health in my riding on Wednesday at Algonquin College. Mike MacDonald spent his life making us laugh. Even as we mourn his untimely passing, we will always remember Mike MacDonald with a smile.
The honourable member for Oshawa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in the House today to recognize the beginning of the Baha'i Nowruz celebration. Canadians of the Baha'i faith in my community and across Canada will be celebrating Nowruz to mark the beginning of the Baha'i calendar year. Organizations like the Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is in Oshawa will be hosting celebrations to commemorate this very important event. Just like New Year's Day, Nowruz is a great opportunity for families and communities to come together in celebration of their culture and, of course, their shared values. It also serves as a great reminder of the overwhelming diversity that exists right here in Canada. On behalf of my Conservative colleagues, I extend my best wishes to everyone participating in the Nowruz celebration. May the coming new year bring you nothing but health and happiness. Happy Nowruz. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for La Salle Aymar Verdun. Mr. Speaker, yesterday I attended the St. Patrick's Day Parade in Montreal, even if the itinerary had to be changed. Due to construction over the last few years, the joy and incredible atmosphere which surround the parade every year was present once again this year. St. Patrick's Day has been celebrated in Montreal since 1759. A parade has been held every year since 1824, which shows the importance and deep roots of Irish culture in Montreal. To date, it remains the biggest parade of its kind organized in Canada.
Day celebrations were brought to Canada by Irish immigrants. This year marks its 195th anniversary. On this special day, I want to take the time to recognize the structural role the Irish community has played in the foundation of Canada and how much it has contributed to its values and heritage. Thank you.
The honourable member for Windsor West.
Mr. Speaker, it is with much sadness that I rise today on behalf of my NDP colleagues to pay tribute to a former Member of Parliament, colleague and friend, Bev Desjarlais. Bev passed away on Thursday at 62 years young. Bev was elected to the House of Commons for the riding of Churchill in 1997 and re-elected in both 2000 and 2004. She was a hard-working and dedicated MP who has always stood up for her constituents. She later worked for the Department of Veteran Affairs, advocating and working on behalf of all veterans. I had the honour of having an office across the hall from Bev, and for years she provided me with guidance, advice, and laughs. For any other MP or staffer, she was known as an unofficial Hill Social Director. Bev could send you to any meeting or event, and you would leave with much more than what you arrived with. Over the last weeks, former and present colleagues had the honour of sharing messages with Bev. Former party leader Ed Broadbent said it best this week, quote, "I found in Bev a warm, spontaneous, unpredictable, gutsy, caring woman who fought for what she believed. What more could someone want?" Indeed, Bev was strong, passionate, and had convictions in everything she did. We all learn from Bev Desjarlais and carry with her for all of our lives. On behalf of the NDP, we'd like to send our condolences to Bev's family, her 3 sons, Chris, Stephen, and Patrick, her grandchildren, brothers, and sisters. God bless you for sharing Bev with us and for Canada.
Hear, hear. Honorable député de
The Honourable Member for Bourassa. Mr. Speaker, March 8th was International Women's Day. This year's theme is My Feminism. I had the tremendous honor of awarding a Certificate of Merit and to decorate 8 exceptional women in the riding of Bourassa. These women, heads of businesses, community organizations, Golden Age clubs, as well as social development officers, all of whom promote living in harmony and walk the path of equality for everyone every day. I am extremely pleased to introduce them to the House of Commons of Canada. They are Amina El Kiraoui, Manuela François Saint-Cyr, Rose-André Hubard, Isabelle Laurin, Ruth Bibel, Jean-Françoise Niwemfora, Palmina Panichella, and Rosalia Barbieri. Please join me in congratulating these 8 women, winners of the Member of Parliament Medal. Thank you.
Honourable Member for Dauphin, Swan River, Neepawa.
Mr. Speaker, as part of their Climate and Green Plan, the Government of Manitoba has invested an incredible $102 million to create the Conservation Trust Fund. The Conservation Trust will reduce emissions, grow the economy, and invest all revenues back into the province with a made-in-Manitoba approach. This allocation, Mr. Speaker, is a truly historic endowment that will release an estimate of $5 million annually into the local economy to support projects and programs that conserve and enhance natural resources and increase resilience to drought and floods. The Made in Manitoba approach also acknowledges the importance of conserving Manitoba's vast natural landscapes, and these investments will play a significant role in the conservation of wetlands and other wildlife habitats. This Made in Manitoba plan also reduces more emissions compared to the federal plan at a lower cost to individuals and the economy. I strongly encourage this Liberal government to learn from Manitoba and adopt similar measures that will have a real and tangible outcome for Canada's environment and economy.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton-Canso.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to stand in this House today and speak about a simple but powerful idea that providing Canadians with the opportunity to realize their full potential isn't just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do for our economy. Mr. Speaker, it's unacceptable that in 2018, women in Canada earned 69 cents on average for every dollar earned by a man. That's why I'm proud that through Budget 2018, our government is announcing it will introduce proactive pay equity legislation, which would apply to about 1.2 million employed Canadians in federally regulated sectors. Taking action on pay equity will move the dial for women, but we know much more is needed, such as the government's investments in early learning and childcare, better training and learning financing, enhanced parental leave flexibility, pay transparency, and the continued appointment of skilled, talented women in leadership positions. We are taking action on the gender wage gap, and I hope my colleagues in this House will continue to support this too.
Honorable député de Saint-Léonard, Saint-Michel.
Mr. Speaker, I salute my mother, Giuseppina Diorio, and one might ask, why is she here today?
My mother came to serve my fellow colleagues the white lasagna she cooked herself, as she does regularly for the charitable organizations she chooses to devote herself to. When my mother found out that members of the opposition would not have access to our lobby, she committed to coming back to prepare them a special meal as well. The House did not sit on March 8th. I would like to seize the opportunity to highlight the accomplishments and exemplary courage of both my mother and my grandmother, 2 heroes who are not well known.
Buon onomastico e dal fondo del mio cuore, grazie per aver fatto di me l'uomo che sono. Tanti saluti a Nicky e Silvane da ICTV. Una lunga vita a voi tutti.
Brava.
The Honourable Member for Beauport-Limoilou. Mr. Speaker, I wish to highlight the incredible athletic performance of someone from Beauport-Limoilou who honoured our country on the international stage. On December 16th in Iceland, he participated in the biggest obstacle course race called the Spartan Race Iceland, where he got the medal for the Ultra World Championship 2017. He gave a truly great performance. Only 100 of the best athletes in the world participated. He survived 21 hours and 45 minutes of events, including 18 hours and 30 minutes of nonstop races covering 62 kilometers in the cold and over mountains. Today, he's getting ready for his next international competition, which will happen in a few days, and will represent Canada in France. On behalf of all citizens of Beauport-Limoilou, I would like to congratulate Mr. Dumont for his courage and to congratulate him for his medals awarded in the past and that will be awarded in the future. Thank you.
Kildonan, St. Paul.
Mr. Speaker, tomorrow is Worldwide Quilting Day, and I would like to highlight a group of women who are using their skills to create spectacular pieces of work. The Material Girls of East St. Paul, led by Fran Howard, are a quilting club that have come together to share their common love of making beautiful works of art. Founded in 1999, they have worked on many projects, including the East St. Paul Centennial Quilt. The group often puts their talents on display by participating in quilting shows, 3 of which they've hosted. Working together has helped these women share their ideas and techniques, but most importantly, has made quilting more enjoyable through socialization. This combination of both talent and sense of community embodies the people of Kildonan St. Paul, making the most out of any opportunity in any season. Keep up the great work. Your positive spirits are impossible not to admire. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Marc-Aurel-Fortin. Mr. Speaker, as you know, young Athena Gervais, 14 years old, passed away on March 1st on school grounds in Laval, in my riding. Toxicological tests are ongoing. They should soon reveal the details surrounding her death. This tragedy leads us as a society to review the support offered to our young people, as well as the regulation of drinks with a high percentage of alcohol, in order to offer young people the best future possible. Young Athena is the symbol of all of Canada's youth. Let us make sure that this never happens again. My thoughts go to her family, her mother, whom I had the opportunity to meet, her father, present here today on the Hill, her sisters, and all her friends and loved ones. Mr. Speaker, this situation concerns all of us, and we should all sincerely reflect on it. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Mr. Speaker, Cal Maskery was serving time for violent crime. One day, in the depths of despair, he saw Billy Graham preaching on television. He decided to turn his life around. Cal met his wife, a local volunteer, while still in prison. They got married on the day of his release. Cal wanted to help people, so he founded Harvest House Atlantic in Moncton, where he remains the executive director. Harvest House is a community hub for those in need. It now includes an emergency shelter, step-up housing, addictions recovery, and skills training. Harvest House is supported through donations and through some government programs like the Canada Summer Jobs Program. But this year, Harvest House had their application rejected as incomplete because Cal would not sign the values test. This values test and the vote tonight is not about politics or ideology. It's about people like Cal and the communities they serve. It's about addicts who need help. It's about seniors who need housing. It's about young people who set out on a path to lifelong service. And it's about charitable organizations who want to serve their communities. These are the people we're fighting for.
The Honourable Member for Gatineau. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. From March 11th to 17th, it was the 30th edition of Quebec's Intellectual Disabilities Week. The intent is to raise public awareness about the reality of people with an intellectual disability and the positive contribution they make. Thousands of people throughout Quebec and Canada are affected by intellectual disabilities. I had the opportunity to welcome a group of participants for the Outaouais Association for Community Integration, including Mulligan on the on the Parliamentary Hill to watch Question Period. Recently, I had the opportunity to visit the center, and I could see in the eyes of the participants the impact that this organization has had on their lives. I would like to seize the opportunity to recognize the work of organizations throughout the country such as APICO and GAPNO, who are doing great work to support and to assist people with intellectual disabilities as well as their families. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Rimouski, Nejet, Témiscouata-les-Basques. Mr. Speaker, March 20th, we will celebrate the International Day of the Francophonie. This will be an opportunity to highlight the considerable contribution of Francophone communities and Francophiles here and throughout the world. If I mention it a day in advance, it's to invite everybody in this House to join us, as tomorrow all New Democrat MPs will speak only French during question period. We invite members of other political parties to do the same. More than a symbol, we are demonstrating our commitment to the Francophonie. We are going to demonstrate that all matters of public interest can be reflected upon and resolved in the language of Molière. As Yves Duteil said so well, French is a beautiful language with splendid words, which carries its history and its accents. It's a beautiful language, those who know to defend it. It offers us the words we were missing to be able to understand each other and is the strength we need to live in harmony. I extend the invitation to all parliamentarians. Tomorrow, let us speak French.
Order. I think we're all happy to see back the next person who will speak, back and looking well, the member for Caribou Prince George.
And now I'm just going to be a mess. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to say a heartfelt thank you. It's been almost 2 months to the day since my health took an abrupt turn. And to say it's been difficult would be an understatement. It has, to say the least, has been incredibly humbling. To my team, to my friends and colleagues from all sides of this House, and indeed from across the nation, I want to say thank you. Your words of encouragement, your cards, your fruit baskets, your flowers have meant more to me and my family than you may ever know. To the doctors and nurses at the University Hospital of Northern British Columbia, thankful. I'm thankful for all the work that they do. And Mr. Speaker, I've seen the conditions that the men and women work in, and Mr. Speaker, we can do better for them. To my colleagues, we lead busy lives. It is easy to lose sight of what is most important. The work we do here in this House and in our ridings has meaning. Every meeting, every speech, every event, every text, every call. It is easy to get caught up in the whirlwind, but without our health, we have nothing. So stop. Take time to reflect. And above all else, please, please take care of yourself. And in closing, to my wife, Kelly, and my entire family, your strength when faced with the unimaginable is simply amazing. Thank you for your patience, your love, and your support. Words cannot express my love for you.
The Honourable Member for Argenteuil-Lapti-Nation.
The Canadian Paralympic Committee for the Winter Games in Pyeongchang this year was greatness is rare. It's true because with only 55 athletes on the population of 35 million, it's only 0.0000157% of the population of Canadians who make the cut represent us with Team Canada. But it's also false because greatness was far from rare. With Team Canada this year, our team earned a record of 28 medals this year. Our best performance ever, and Canadians just missed the podium several times. with 9 fourth-place results and 5 more in the top 5. And we can also believe greatness will be even rarer, with next time with 20 athletes winning their first ever Paralympic medal in Pyeongchang. We can say without a doubt that Paralympians represent greatness better than anyone. Vous êtes une source d'inspiration.
You are a source of inspiration, and we are all very proud of our Paralympic athletes. Go, Canada, go.
Oral questions, questions orales. The honourable member from Milton.
Mr. Speaker, the government has announced that Canadian soldiers will be taking part in a mission to Mali. And in his own words, the Prime Minister has acknowledged that this is putting soldiers in harm's way. Now, Mali is the UN's most dangerous peacekeeping mission that they have currently, and the UN is experiencing the worst spate of UN peacekeeping fatalities in the organization's history. The Prime Minister would have been advised by his people as to the nature of the risk to soldiers and as well the likelihood of casualties in this mission. Can the Prime Minister inform the House as to what the risk is to soldiers of a fatality?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, 2 years ago during the election campaign, we committed to re-engage Canadian soldiers in UN peacekeeping missions. We know that it's something that's important to Canadians and it's important to the world that we be helping out in the best ways we can. That's why we are happy to respond to a direct request from the UN and from our allies to provide logistical and support helicopters to their mission in Mali. We will continue to work with the members opposite to determine the best way to move forward on debate in this House. We look forward to talking about that more in the coming days.
Member for Milton.
Mr. Speaker, we all want to see stability brought to conflict-ridden regions of this world, but the reality is there were 162 fatalities of UN peacekeepers in Mali alone. Less than 2 months ago, the UN Security Council was advised by the Undersecretary of Peacekeeping Operations that the objectives in the Mali mission were in question and were urged to reassess this mission. I know the Prime Minister is happy that we're going to Mali, but quite seriously, there is a real threat to our Canadian soldiers. Will those being deployed in this war zone be allowed to actively engage targets?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, we are committed to contributing in ways that bring the most value to the UN mission in Mali. We believe it's important for Canada to play a role in peace operations around the world. But the safety of our men and women in uniform remains paramount during all operations. We always act to mitigate as best as possible the level of risk Canadian Armed Forces personnel face while on operations. The personnel we will deploy on peace operations will be equipped with the appropriate equipment and will receive the necessary training for their assigned missions, although, of course, we cannot altogether eliminate the risks.
Honourable member for Milton.
I understand that we can't mitigate the risk, Mr. Speaker. The question I'm asking is this. What is the risk associated with our Canadian soldiers? They deserve to know this. This is the most dangerous mission in the world right now. This is something we're sending Canadian soldiers into without any information at all from this government. It's absolutely deplorable. Canadians deserve to have the answer. How many soldiers are projected to be lost in this mission?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, unlike the previous government, we've committed to open information and discussions with the members opposite, with all members in this House, on the nature and the moving forward of missions like this. The previous government chose to wrap itself in the flag and use special forces as photo ops while not informing the House about anything. What we are going to be doing is remaining open and responsible with all members in this House as we move forward and re-engaging in UN peacekeeping missions to support our allies to move forward on peace in the world. That's what Canadians expect, and that's what we're going to deliver.
The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Saint-Charles. Well, it's all very well to speak about the previous government, but the previous government always held debates on its missions throughout the world. The Prime Minister decided to send our peacekeepers to Mali to maintain peace that has never existed, but Mali is a war zone. The Prime Minister has shown that he's not too concerned about Canadian safety. And now he's going to send our troops to a country at war. I want to know if the Prime Minister can tell us what the chain of command will be for the troops being deployed will be. The Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the safety of our men and women in uniform is our top priority in any of our operations. We always take any necessary steps to mitigate as much as possible the risks that our military members are exposed to during their operations. The personnel that we will deploy in our peacekeeping missions will be well equipped and will receive the training that they require in order to be successful in their mission. We have full confidence in the abilities of our armed forces and in the impact that Canada can have for the better in the world. The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Saint-Charles. Well, I think the Prime Minister really needs his notes because he doesn't understand what's going on. And that's why the Prime Minister actually just makes his decision behind closed doors, but he should submit these decisions to parliamentarians. Now, it goes without saying that we trust our military members to be able to undertake any mission, but this is Mali on a pseudo peacekeeping mission from Canada. I'd like to know if the Prime Minister can tell us what the rules of engagement will be. The Right Honourable the Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, unlike the previous government, we are going to act transparently. We want to have a good debate in this House. And we have already approached the opposition to discuss how we will proceed with this debate. And we will be finalizing these plans over the next few weeks. The Honourable Member for Rimouski-Nejet-Témiscouata-Basque. Mr. Speaker, the Liberal government has finally made an announcement on a peacekeeping mission. After 2 years and a half in power, after repeated appeals from the UN and from our international allies, and the failure of our government to deploy troops in Colombia when they were needed, there are still some details that are lacking. For example, when the mission is going to begin, or how many women will be deployed. Was 2.5 years not enough to start providing answers to these questions? Why so little clarity? The Right Honourable the Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, as we said during our campaign, we want to contribute to international peacekeeping missions. We announced our commitment to send operational forces to Mali, including Chinook helicopters and Griffin helicopters. Members of the military will also assist with medical evacuations of soldiers and will provide logistical support during this mission. We know that it is important that Canada be present in order to ensure peace and stability throughout the world. We have already approached the opposition to discuss how we will proceed with the debate in the House, and we look forward to beginning these conversations. The Honourable Member.
Government made grand promises that Canada would return to UN peacekeeping, but you wouldn't know it from our current contributions. At the end of last month, Canada had just under 40 troops and police officers on UN missions, a record low in the history of Canadian peacekeeping. Today's announcement likely falls short of meeting the peacekeeping commitments the government made. So my question is, when will the government reveal exactly how they intend to fulfill the promises they made over 2.5 years ago?
Honourable Prime Minister.
I have to admit, Mr. Speaker, it's a bit of an interesting turn of events when the Conservatives think we're doing too much with our military and the NDP don't think we're doing enough. As I've said, we are pleased that we're moving forward on peace operations with the UN, re-engaging with the UN the way Canadians expect us to, the way we committed to 2 years ago during the election campaign, and I very much look forward to working with the opposition members to figure out a way to move forward on debate regarding this mission so that all Canadians can be apprised of what we're doing and how we're doing it.
Member for Essex.
While Canada is exempted for now from the U.S. President's global tariffs on steel and aluminum imports, the President stated very clearly that he will use the threat of future tariffs to get what he wants in NAFTA renegotiations. Our steel and aluminum industry, forestry, aerospace, paper, what's next? $64 billion could be lost and 500,000 Canadian jobs are at risk. Yet all the Prime Minister has done is pay lip service. Canadians need to know how many more tariffs or threats of tariffs this government will allow before they take action.
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, allow me to say once again what a pleasure it was for me to be able to spend time with steel workers and aluminum workers last week across the country. The hard-working steel workers at Stealth Co., the aluminum workers at Alma have been working hard to continue to deliver, and I was very pleased to be able to meet with them, to listen to their concerns directly, and to reassure them about the path forward we're taking. We have continued to defend the industry in this country. We will continue to, whether it's moving forward on pipelines, whether it's moving forward on protecting our steel, we will continue.
The Honourable Order. The Honourable Member for Essex.
When will this Prime Minister get his head out of the sand? Just last week, President Trump bragged that he made up figures while talking to the PM about supposed trade deficit the U.S. has with Canada. And the PM says that he has full confidence in the President being straight with him. Our Prime Minister is not being taken seriously by our largest trading partners, and Canadians are worried. Does the Prime Minister still believe that the President is being straight with him? And when will the PM be straight with Canadians and tell them exactly how he plans to protect their jobs?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it was a real pleasure to speak with steelworkers in Hamilton about exactly how we were standing up for their jobs. We've been working with the American administration over the past year to ensure that we are standing up for Canadian jobs. We are standing up for Canadian interests, and we are moving forward in a responsible way to renegotiate NAFTA in ways that will improve it for Canadians, for Canadian workers, and for our partners. We're going to continue to take this approach that is working with the American government, regardless of what the NDP proposes.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, for 2 years now, we've been asking hundreds and hundreds of times to the government when we will get back to a balanced budget, and we have never gotten an answer. But, Mr. Speaker, we're not the only ones who are fed up. The Parliamentary Budget Officer, in a scathing report published last week, said that the government has completely lost control and that it has no plans for returning to a balanced budget. Can the Prime Minister reassure Canadians and tell us when we will get back to a balanced budget, as the PBO is demanding? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, 2 years ago, the Canadians had a choice between the austerity being proposed by the Conservative government, results of which we know what they were: the worst growth since the Second World War, the worst record on jobs, and the plan that the Liberal government was suggesting. For example, investing in infrastructure, giving more to those who need it most, and fostering growth in our economy, investing in science, as we've just done in this budget. And the results speak for themselves, Mr. Speaker. 600,000 jobs over the past 2 years, majority of those full-time, and that's what we're proud of. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Well, here are the facts, Mr. Speaker. 2 years and a few months ago, the Prime Minister gave his finance minister a mandate letter. And what did it say in that letter on page 7? It said, balanced budget by 2019-2020. I wasn't the one who said that. It was the Prime Minister. Can the Prime Minister stand up and tell Canadians that he is going to honour the promise he made to them and get back to a balanced budget? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I said earlier in my response, our plan is working, and we're going to continue with that plan to ensure growth in Canada, responsible growth in Canada. And we are going to make sure that our debt to GDP ratio continues to go down. Mr. Speaker, thank you.
Member for Carleton.
D'ici la fin du mandat,
Well, Mr. Speaker, they made a promise.
They'd eliminate $3 billion in spending after they did a comprehensive review to find waste. And having done that review over the last 2 years, they've come to the conclusion that there's not a single penny in waste that they can cancel. In fact, it gave them ideas on how they could spend even more. Mr. Speaker, will they keep their promise to eliminate $3 billion in annual spending waste by the end of this term? Yes or no?
President of the Treasury Board.
Mr. Speaker, we are always vigilant, working across government to ensure the best value for tax dollars while we make important investments in the interests of Canadians today and in the future. Mr. Speaker, the innovation review that we led, in fact, working with ISET, actually resulted in a more responsive and focused and targeted approach to innovation writ large across the Government of Canada. But I will say, Mr. Speaker, we will not do what the Conservatives did, for instance, when they cut 700 pay advisors to save $70 million on the eve of an election, destroying the pay system for the Canadians.
The honourable member for Carleton.
Well, the Liberals claim that their deficit spending would go to infrastructure, but now the Parliamentary Budget Officer reveals that a quarter of that money has lapsed and just disappeared into the massive Liberal spending hole. And now this, and I quote, Budget 2018 provides an incomplete account of the changes to the government's $186 billion infrastructure spending plan. PBO requested the new plan, but it does not exist, end quote. How do you spend $186 billion with no plan?
Good question.
Honourable Minister of Infrastructure and Communities.
Speaker, we are proud of the relationship that we are able to build with our provinces, municipalities and territories to deliver a historic infrastructure plan. And under our plan, Mr. Speaker, we have approved more than 4,100 projects with a combined investment of more than $35 billion. These investments are creating jobs for the middle class. They're helping build us a stronger economy, move us to our low green economy, as well as improve people's living conditions. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member for Carleton.
Let's review the fiscal promises. They said they'd cut $3 billion in waste. Instead, they found billions of dollars in increased spending. They said the deficit would be just $10 billion. It's been double that. They said the budget would be balanced by 2019. Now they say that won't happen for another 25 years, during which time they will add, or some government will add, $500 billion of deficits. Mr. Speaker, they said the middle class would pay less. Instead, the Fraser Institute says 80% are paying more. With all these broken promises, how can the Canadian people believe anything this Prime Minister says about their money?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to remind the member the first thing we did was lower taxes on the middle class and raise them on the wealthiest 1%. The other thing we've done is we've made the Canada Child Benefit a new and more progressive program to give more to those who need it the most. That has lifted 300,000 kids out of poverty. And what we've said to Canadians, Mr. Speaker, is that we would succeed where they have failed. We have grown this economy more than they ever could in the decade that they were in power. We've got the fastest growth in the G7, and we'll continue on that path, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member for Carleton.
Mr. Speaker, they said the deficit would be just $10 billion. It's been nearly 20. This year, the deficit will be 3 times the size they committed in their platform. And they are unable to find a single penny in savings necessary to eventually return us to a balanced budget. So why doesn't the member just rise now and admit what the Parliamentary Budget Officer has already suggested, and what Canadians already know, which is that they will never balance Canada's budget?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, we have a very responsible fiscal approach that has been applauded by people all over the world. When the economy was sluggish, like the one we inherited from the previous Conservative government, it was intelligent to make investments where the need was, for example, in infrastructure and communities, to stimulate growth and to stimulate the economy. That's what we did, and we're making sure that our debt to GDP ratio is going down. The Honourable Member for Jonquière. Mr. Speaker, aluminum plays a very important role in some of our areas, including Jonquière, and we are very proud of that. Despite President Trump's temporary exemption, workers in our regions are still concerned, and they're worried about their uncertain future. Workers deserve a clear path and hard work on the part of this government. Like the Quebec government is currently doing, will this government immediately implement an action plan? The Honourable Minister for Global Affairs. Our government worked very hard to obtain an exemption for Canada on steel, aluminum, and we will continue to work very hard until these tariffs disappear completely and permanently. Our priority is to get the best outcomes possible for Canadians and their families.
For Hamilton Mountain.
Mr. Speaker,
The Prime Minister is claiming to have made a significant commitments to the budget to end pension theft, but this is just not true. There were no answers from the Prime Minister during his PR trip last week about changing the laws to protect workers' pensions. Workers have had enough talk. It's time for action. We can and we must end pension theft now. Bravo. When will the government outline a real plan for the protecting of workers' pensions, like the one I've already presented them in Bill C-384?
Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Economic Development.
Mr. Speaker, as we've made clear, our heart goes out to those serious workers, and we are taking their advice. We're taking advice from all sides of the House, Mr. Speaker, to look into how we can better the situation of pensioners in this country. We've made that promise, Mr. Speaker. We'll continue to work in that regard, and we'll continue to examine any suggestion that comes with it. Thank you.
Honourable Member for Durham.
Mr. Speaker, the plot surrounding the Atwall scandal continued to thicken even while the House was away, courtesy of Jaspal Atwall himself. Mr. Speaker, he held a press conference where he directly refuted the Liberal government's claims about an Indian conspiracy. Mr. Atwall confirmed that he asked the MP for Surrey Centre for an invitation to the Prime Minister's event. Mr. Atwall confirmed that the Liberal government got him that invite and that he has never spoken to the Indian government. When will the Prime Minister rise in this House and apologize to India for this diplomatic incident?
Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, Canada's national security agencies are impartial and non-partisan. They are highly professional and competent. We trust them always to promote and protect and defend the national interest of Canada, and I am confident they have done that at all times.
Honourable Member for Durham.
Mr. Speaker, the person at the centre of the Atwall scandal doesn't believe the Prime Minister's wild conspiracy claims. The Liberal MP for Surrey Centre doesn't believe the Prime Minister's claims because he apologized and accepted responsibility. Even the Foreign Minister, Mr. Speaker, doesn't believe the Prime Minister because she admitted to apologizing to the Indian government, calling the Atwall invitation an honest mistake. Mr. Speaker, it appears there's only two people who still believe in the Prime Minister's wild conspiracy theories: the Prime Minister and his National Security Advisor. When will the Prime Minister allow the National Security Advisor to brief this House in the same way they briefed the press gallery?
Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, the issue with respect to the invitation has been clearly discussed and responded to. The invitation should never have been issued, and when it was discovered, it was rescinded, as it should have been.
The Honourable Member for Richmond-Athabasca. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A known terrorist found guilty of an assassination attempt was invited to the Prime Minister's dinner. We have, on the one hand, a Liberal MP saying he was the one who invited him, and on the other hand, the Prime Minister who's saying that this was supposedly a conspiracy on the part of the Indian government. How can the Indian government organize a plot against a Canadian mission when a Liberal member is saying that he was the one who invited this person, this terrorist? If the Prime Minister has proof, what's he waiting for to come and table it? What's he waiting for to answer these questions so that this affair can be cleared up once and for all?
Mr. Speaker, 2 points very specifically. Number one, the invitation should never have been issued. When it was discovered, it was rescinded. Number two, whenever senior government officials with long experience issue opinions and advice and recommendations, they do so impartially and always acting in the best interests of Canada to defend the Canadian national interest. They have done that at all times.
Honourable Member for Richmond-Athabasca. Mr. Speaker, we're not talking about just anything here. The Prime Minister's senior security advisor referred to a plot on the part of the Indian government. And it was the Prime Minister who spoke about this. The Indian government has categorically denied this. Imagine, here we have the Minister of Foreign Affairs speaking about an honest mistake. An honest mistake? 19 MPs and ministers on vacation in India. An invited terrorist, a half a day's worth of work in 8 days. And all this paid by who? Paid by taxpayers. And they're talking about an honest mistake? will the Prime Minister apologize to the Indian government and to the Canadian public?
Mr. Speaker, the honourable gentleman overlooks the fact that during the course of that mission, there was about $1 billion worth of trade and investment identified, about 6,000 Canadian jobs created, a number of different initiatives that went forward, including an agreement resolving a fumigation dispute with respect to Canadian pulse crop exports to India. And at the end of the mission, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister of India expressed his satisfaction with the success of what had been accomplished.
Order. The member for North Island Powell River.
Mr. Speaker, there are 300 workers in my riding at the Powell River Catalyst Paper Mill who make the products that were recently slapped with a 22% punitive tariff by the U.S. government. Those tariffs directly threaten the mill, meaning 300 good-paying Canadian jobs in a small community that needs the mill's payroll, taxes, and investment are at risk. These workers know the government's words on the unfair tariffs aren't worth the paper they're written on. Where is the leadership, the real action our workers need from this government to protect their jobs?
Mr. Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, we are deeply disappointed with the unjustified preliminary rates announced by the U.S. Department of Commerce. Canada's forestry industry sustains good middle-class jobs and provides economic opportunity for rural and Indigenous communities across our country. We will continue to work with all our partners across Canada to defend this vital sector against unfair and unwarranted U.S. trade measures and practices.
Honourable member for Cowichan, Nauhat, Langford.
300 workers, Mr. Speaker, and those talking points help none of them. The federal government has so far failed to come to the defense of workers in British Columbia whose jobs are at risk with U.S. tariffs on groundwood paper. These are good-paying, family-supporting jobs in my riding, and the industry also supports thousands of indirect jobs throughout British Columbia. What is this government going to do to stand up to this unfair U.S. trade action, and when will the Liberals finally show some strength in international trade talks and protect Canadian jobs?
Here, here. Good question.
Mr. Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, the preliminary rates announced by the U.S. Department of Commerce are unjustified and they are unacceptable to Canada. We stand with our forestry industry and we are taking every possible action, including in international arenas, to support and defend our forestry industry. We stand with Canadian workers, we are fighting for them, and we will succeed.
The Honourable Member for Rivière-des-Mille-Îles. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tomorrow, March 20th, Ottawa will host a round of negotiations for Mercosur, a free trade agreement between Uruguay, Paraguay, Brazil, Argentina, Venezuela, and Bolivia. Canada is seeking to sign a free trade agreement with this economic community. Mercosur, with the main objective of diversifying our international trade markets with these countries, which have similar objectives and strong growing economies. I'd like the Minister to provide us with an update. The Honourable Minister, I'd like to thank the member for Rivière-des-Mille for her excellent work. I was in Paraguay recently to launch negotiations, and thanks to our trade diversification process, Canada will succeed in the decades to come. With Mercosur, we are pursuing our trade negotiation process. It's the most progressive ever, and for the first time, this will result an impact in a study of the impact on work, human rights, Indigenous peoples, and gender balance. The Honourable Member for Bellechasse, Les Etimandes-Lévis. Mr. Speaker, this morning we talked about freedom in this country, but the Liberals and the Prime Minister are attacking this freedom of religion, among other things, by using a dogmatic ideological approach. They're attacking the most vulnerable and depriving people of jobs. When will the Prime Minister and the Liberals support our motion? We've got a vote today so that the employment summer job program remains a program to create jobs and not an attack on freedoms.
Jobs program has always been to provide young people with good quality job experiences where they can gain that valuable experience and help them prepare for school. And unlike the Conservatives, who have funded groups that have promoted anti-abortion, groups that distribute graphic images, that discriminate against the LGBTQ community, we are going to ensure that we do not support groups that actively undermine Canadian rights. We predict a successful year ahead. We know that the number of applications are on par with last year. We look forward to doubling the Canada Summer Jobs opportunities for young people in this country again this year.
Honourable Member for Elgin, Middlesex, London.
Well, Mr. Speaker, last week the approval list for Canada Summer Jobs came out to the MPs. Compared to last year, 36 fewer organizations in my riding even applied. At least 15 of these organizations told me that they didn't because of the Liberals' values test. Sure. Instead of funding groups who provide housing and childcare, the Liberals have dumped money into for-profit organizations and retailers. Will the Liberals admit this is wrong, vote in favour of our motion, and support Canadians who are trying to help their communities?
Minister of Employment.
Canada's prosperity relies on ensuring that young people get the experience that they need for the jobs of today and tomorrow. And that's why the Canada Summer Jobs program has been so critical in ensuring that young people get that oftentimes first well-paying job that will help them identify their career path and gain those skills that they need. We predict a very successful year ahead. The number of applications received and currently are under a review are on par with 2017. We know that we are going to continue to help young people get that experience and thrive going into the future.
Honourable Member for Order. The Honourable Member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, the minister referred earlier to an organization that I know received tens of thousands of dollars from the Liberal member for Mississauga, Aaron Mills. But that choice by that member doesn't have anything to do with our motion today, which speaks to non-political, non-activist groups, which for reasons of conscience and their conscience rights in Section 2 of the Charter, do not want to check this box. Now, will the minister support our motion, which allows these charitable organizations to continue to provide this vital work? Will she look at the motion and support it on the basis of its support for non-political, non-activist organizations?
Minister of Employment.
Mr. Speaker, the Canada Summer Jobs program serves a critical purpose in this country, and that's to make sure that young people get quality job experiences, oftentimes for the first time in their young careers. And that's why we're going to make sure that funds don't go in any way that actively work to undermine Canadians' rights. Young people are counting us to stand up for their rights, to deliver this program in a way that is fair and equitable and respects all Canadians, and that's exactly what we'll do, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
You know, Mr. Speaker, with respect to the minister, she's just not answering a very direct question. We have a motion before the House today which says that non-political, non-activist groups should be able to access the Canada Summer Jobs program regardless of their private convictions. We believe that it's a violation of fundamental charter rights to force an organization to disclose their private convictions if that has absolutely nothing to do with the activities that they're involved in. And if the government's sincere about not targeting faith-based charities, they could do one very simple step to reassure those organizations. That's support our motion today. Will they?
Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the process this year asked organizations to commit to the fact that the core activities, their core mandate, and the job description for which they were applying would not in any way actively undermine the rights of young Canadians. And in fact, we have had resounding applications, the same as last year. We anticipate that over 70,000 young people will have excellent job experiences across the country in a variety of different sectors that will help them gain the skills they need, determine their career paths, earn a little extra money. Mr. Speaker, we're incredibly proud of the fact that this government puts youth success at its forefront and knows that it's critically connected to our economic success.
The Honourable Member for Abitibi-Témiscamingue. Mr. Speaker, many main travel routes in rural regions aren't even covered by a cell phone service at all. So it's all fine and well to invest for 5G, but during that time, nothing will be done in the regions. The Liberals are so out of touch that the word sell isn't even in their most recent budget. So if the minister is ready to pull his head out of the sand, I'd like to invite him to go on a little road trip with me. He'll realize that just a few hours from here, we fall into a void. How much longer will it take for rural residents not to be considered second-class citizens by this minister? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, communications and cell phone service and high-speed internet are essential, not a luxury. Our government acknowledges that we require these services in the regions and in large cities, and that's why we want to ensure that Canadians have access to this technology regardless of their postal code. It's a question of equality of opportunity. Our program will deal with this issue and will enable our communities and our businesses to benefit from opportunities being offered by the global digital community.
Saint-Bagot.
The Honourable Member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagot. In his most recent budget, the PBO called on the government, the Liberals in fact, to flesh out how they will spend the billions in infrastructure to prevent further delays. He also forecasts that some amounts won't be spent on time. The PBO goes as far as to say that the Liberals have no plan for spending billions of dollars over the next 12 years. The municipalities have been waiting far too long and can no longer await anymore. So, on their behalf, I ask the government, where is the plan to prevent delays?
Infrastructure.
Mr. Speaker, we work very closely with Federation of Canadian Municipalities, with provinces and territories to develop a historic plan that is investing more than $180 billion to build the necessary infrastructure that has been neglected by the Harper government for a decade. We have approved 4,100 projects with a combined investment of $35 billion. Last week, we signed 3 bilateral agreements with the province of Ontario, New Brunswick, and Northwestern to deliver historic investments so communities get the infrastructure they need and deserve.
Opposition House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, serious concerns are being raised about China-owned telecom company Huawei having access to 5G technology. Recently, a U.S. Senate committee heard compelling testimony from 4 of their agencies, including the FBI and the CIA, that says that Huawei poses a serious cybersecurity threat. Does the Prime Minister recognize that there may be a threat to Canadian cybersecurity, and what is he doing to stop China-owned Huawei from spying on Canadians?
Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, cybersecurity is an extraordinarily important priority for the country and for this government. As the honourable member will have noticed in the last budget, the Minister of Finance has set aside something in excess of $700 million for investments over the next number of years, including the creation of a new cybersecurity centre, one which will have particular attention to the critical infrastructure of this country, which we must indeed protect and defend by every means possible.
Opposition House Leader.
It's not just our allies sounding the alarm, but national security experts in Canada are also. Ward Elcock, former CSIS director, told the Globe and Mail, "I would not want to see Huawei equipment being incorporated into a 5G network in Canada." And Dick Fadden, former national security advisor, is saying that we don't want Canadian infrastructure to be available to Huawei. With what these Canadian experts are saying, will the public safety minister commit to a reevaluation of Canada's ties with China-owned Huawei?
Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, we have just completed a national security review of our cybersecurity systems. That has included every dimension of those systems, including how best to protect critical infrastructure, and we will take every step necessary to make sure that that critical infrastructure, which is vital to Canada and vital to our relations with countries around the world, is properly protected and defended. There is nothing more important than that, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Carlton Trail, Eagle Creek.
Mr. Speaker, amid a busy schedule of family vacations, the Prime Minister squeezed in some visits to Canadian steel plants. In Saskatchewan, he visited Evraz, where they manufacture pipelines. The Liberals' abdication of federal leadership on the Trans Mountain Pipeline is hurting Evraz, the prairie oil and gas sector, as well as the Canadian steel industry. Can the Prime Minister reassure Canadian steelworkers that construction on Trans Mountain will start this spring?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we continue to say, the environment and the economy go hand in hand, and we continue to support the energy sector in a variety of ways, including the approval of the Trans Mountain Pipeline. And I'd like to add a number of other pipelines as well, Mr. Speaker. The expanded export capacity for the Alberta Clipper, Nova Gas Pipeline, Line 3 replacement project, and our support of the Keystone XL pipeline. Mr. Speaker, I could go on and on. Our government has approved the Trans Mountain expansion, and we stand by that approval. Thank you.
The honourable member for Toronto Danforth. Order.
Last month, the Minister of Families, Children and Social Development released the results of our government's poverty reduction strategy consultations in a What We Heard report. I hosted one of those consultations in my riding, where I heard from Canadians living in poverty and frontline workers about what it's like to live in poverty in our country. Can the Minister please tell this House how Budget 2018 will help low-income Canadians get the support that they need? Thank you.
Well, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would first like to congratulate the member from Toronto Danforth for her strong commitment towards reducing poverty. Budget 2018 introduces the new Canada Workers Benefit, which is going to lift tens of thousands of lower-wage Canadians out of poverty and will also benefit more than 2 million vulnerable Canadians. Budget 2018 also introduces automatic enrollment, which will ensure that eligible Canadians do actually receive the benefit. Mr. Speaker, starting in 2019, the new Canada Workers Benefit will help more vulnerable Canadians work harder and succeed in joining the middle class.
The
honourable member for Mégantic-Lérap. Mr. Speaker, for the Prime Minister, a budget balances itself, and the result is there's billions in deficits. Western grain producers are facing a second crisis. They're unable to deliver their products. The Minister of Agriculture thinks, like his Prime Minister does, that the crisis will resolve itself, and he's refusing to take action. As a result, deficits for everyone and millions in losses for all agricultural producers. Producers are in town, Mr. Speaker. Will the Minister personally commit to taking action instead of believing in fairy tales and waiting for the crisis to resolve itself?
Minister Transport.
The Honourable Minister of Transport. Mr. Speaker, we all want our Western grain producers to deliver their goods to world markets as quickly as possible. That is why the Minister of Agriculture and I have spoken with CN and CP. We told them that they were not doing acceptable work at present, and we asked them to show us how they plan to deal with the problem as it currently exists. Over the past 2 weeks, the situation has improved considerably, and we will continue to monitor progress in the future. The honourable member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie. Last Wednesday, Marielle Franco, a municipal councillor in Rio, was savagely assassinated. She was 38. She was a black woman, a lesbian, a socialist, and a human rights advocate. For years, she had denounced police violence in favelas, and for all of these reasons, she was killed, shot several times in the head. We can't remain silent on this attempt to assassinate hope. Will Canada show leadership and urge Brazil to conduct an independent investigation to shed light on this political assassination? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, as you know full well, human rights, including the rights of LGBTQ communities, are very important components in our foreign policy. They're very important here in Canada, and we are working with our partners, our foreign partners, to defend those rights for all. We will continue to do this very important work. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Glengarry Prescott Russell. Mr. Speaker, our government knows Canadian farmers are key drivers of our economy and make important contributions in the fight against climate change.
The House on the important announcement we made to improve clean technology in Canadian agriculture this morning at Terryland Farms in my riding.
Minister.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for Glengarry Prescott Russell for all his
hard work for Canadian agriculture. Our government is committed to supporting clean technology in Canadian agriculture. Today, I was proud to join the member to announce an investment of $25 million to develop and adapt clean technology in Canadian agriculture. This will help our farmers stay on the cutting edge, grow our economy, and help more people join the middle class. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Foothills.
Mr. Speaker, Western Canadian grain farmers have asked the Liberals for one thing: help us move our grain. We have given the Liberals concrete action that they can take now to get grain moving. Instead, they stand up and defend the rail duopoly, and they have tarnished our reputation as a reliable trading partner. Time is of the essence, and the crisis farmers are facing is critical. Rail cars aren't being delivered, grain isn't moving, farmers aren't getting paid. Does the Agriculture Minister not grasp the seriousness of this crisis? Why will they not take action now to move our grain?
Honourable Minister of Transport.
Mr. Speaker, we want to get our Western farmers' grain to market as quickly as possible. Unlike the previous government, which for 10 years didn't do a darn thing to move grain and other commodities more efficiently. And by the way, they voted against C-49, and I would ask them to speak to their colleagues in the other House to speed up the process with C-49. In the meantime, the Minister of Agriculture and myself have spoken to CN and CP, told them that they have to do better. They are doing better, but we will watch them very carefully.
Alors, l'honorable.
The Honourable Member for La Pointe de l'Île. Mr. Speaker, tomorrow, a Canadian public servant working in Montreal, André Dion, will take legal action at the federal court to have his right to work in French respected. It has been violated throughout his career. It runs counter to Bill 101 and Canadian law, as noted by the Commissioner of Official Languages 8 years ago. That's the price Quebec must pay to be subject to the Canadian system. Will the minister enforce the right to work in French in Quebec in Canadian institutions?
Président du Conseil du Trésor.
Our official languages are at the core of our Canadian values. We will ensure that public servants across Canada continue to have the right to speak in both official languages. This is something that is absolutely fundamental, Mr. Speaker, and we will continue to ensure that from coast to coast to coast, that Canadian public servants are respected, including their rights to speak both official languages.
Député de Manicouagan.
The Honourable Member from Manicouagan. Mr. Speaker, 2 months ago, the Prime Minister portrayed himself as Davy's saviour by promising contracts. To date, the government still hasn't had any contact with Davy, despite the fact that representatives of suppliers urged him to do so directly. This is urgent for all Quebec, Mr. Speaker, but clearly not for the Prime Minister of Canada. What is the Prime Minister waiting for to honour his commitment? Permission from C-SPAN in Irving?
Honourable Minister of Public Services, Service Public.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Davy Shipyard is an important one. We continue to have discussions with the shipyard. We are doing our due diligence. And when we have a decision, we will share it with this House. The Honourable Member for Montcalm. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Health will be holding consultations to put an end to the sale of sugary, high alcoholic content drinks, and that is a good thing. However, we must also act with diligence and thoroughness in order to prevent any new tragedies from occurring. As part of these consultations, will the Minister of Health focus as well on banning guaranine in these alcoholic drinks?
Honorable Minister de la Santé.
The Honourable Minister. I want to thank the member opposite for the question, and I offer my sincere condolences to the family of the deceased girl. Protecting Canadians' health is a priority for our government. We will continue to work on this issue. I have ordered Health Canada to take measures immediately to limit these sugary, high alcoholic content drinks. We will be calling meetings with our provincial counterparts, our territorial counterparts, and other partners, in fact, to address this important issue.
We'll conclude question period. The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, there have been discussions among the parties, and if you seek it, I think you will find unanimous consent for the following motion. That the House, A, acknowledge the strength of the ties and values that Canadians and the British people share. B, condemn in the strongest terms the despicable use of a nerve agent on the sovereign territory of the United Kingdom in the March 4, 2018 chemical attack in Salisbury. C, recognize that the Russian state bears responsibility for this act and has shown a total disregard for the rules-based international order. D, call on Russia to cooperate fully with British investigators. And E, stand in solidarity with the British people and the United Kingdom, a key NATO ally and G7 partner.
Honourable